Welcome back. Thank you for joining me here at the Hakeem Library. I am your librarian, your brother, Khaliq Hakeem. Now, previously we were reading Once a Runner by John L. Parker Jr. So we're going to continue with that. And I'm pretty sure this is where I left off last. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I almost forgot. I gotta put on my hour timer so that we can be timely and get a nice session in. But my phone is on a low percentage, so bear with me. This is very organic and genuine. Time on the clock is 11:22. Why would I ever decide to lie to you? I'll show you as evidence. My little situation over here is looking crazy though, but that's neither here nor there. You're here to gain some information. You're here to read with me. That's what this is. Read with me. Read with me, Khaliq Hakeem. I'm acting like I can't find my timer. Let me start running my mouth. 1 hour on the clock. Let's get it. Every stride now caused him the most profound regret. Spitting fluffy wads of congealed saliva, his thinking soon came only into staccato bursts. 200 yards. Keep him near. Keep him near. Within sight of the finish, he could vaguely see Misner doing a silly bounce and yelling something as Cassidy began to lock up. Andrea would be there somewhere, but he didn't see her. A white haze, a normal phenomenon, clouded everything, like looking through the dirty window of a long abandoned house. Funny how your mind works at the end like this, he thought. The excitement was all outside as he watched quietly from inside his raging skull. Let me try to get closer to this mic so I ain't gotta speak up too much. 100 yards to go, he thought, oh Christ, and threw the remainder of what was left into it. Now that really cost him. O'Rourke burst away from him quickly and won by 10 yards. My boy caught an L. Cassidy was bent over at the waist, hands on knees, doing a little circle. Excuse me. Getting the juices flowing. Doing a little circle stagger that in other circumstances might have passed for amusing. The other runners were noisily starting to come in. Misner stood with his arms around Cassidy's waist, providing balance. Easy, easy, he said in calm, empathetic tones. Cassidy could not speak. His eyes bulged insanely. Breaths came in greedy rasps, and his face was a splotchy violet color. Yak, he said, trying to straighten up. It was too soon. Dizziness forced him back to the hands on knees death grip, the fetal rest position of the totally done-in runner. The white haze had thickened into a heavy fog. He felt faint, but knew his conditioning would protect him from everything but extreme heat. These were the worst few seconds, and he understood better than anything else that, like the tail fin, the Nehru jacket, and the Republic itself, they too would pass. The drained elation, excuse me, special property, and reward of those who have been to the edge and back would come later. But for now, he had a while longer to hurt. Andrea, who had never seen such things, stood close by, almost afraid to touch him. Hands fluttering around each other and over to his wet singlet, the rasping, dripping, violet-shaded runner studied the moist earth between his spiked toes and seemed unaware of her presence. Was he all right? Sure, hell, he's all right, Misner said, surprised by her question. He's just run himself a race, is all. Seeing that Cassidy had his own balance, Misner went off gaily to check the team's scores. Finally straightening up enough to stumble for a few steps, the runner looked at her and said again, "Yak." But this time there was something that could have passed for a smile on his hot face. To her, he looked near death, not a mysterious wand passing, but a demise culminating in hot bouts of fever and hallucination, fearful and soul-wrenching. The smile brought her considerable cheer. "Yak," she smiled back. "Gee, that was uncomfortable," he said seriously, as he began to make himself walk. He was unaccustomed to long spikes. One caught, he stumbled as he gripped her hand. "What did you think? I thought you were going to die there for a second. I was afraid." "It's all right, baby." "Well," he said jovially, "that's the cross-country biz." Denton stood 20 yards away, chatting with the coaches, but his eyes followed Quentin Cassidy closely. Half an hour later, he gathered up Misner and Cassidy, and the three of them trotted off, laughing, on the 8-mile course to get in some miles for the day. So I'm gonna get it out the way early. Who? What? When? Where? Why? And sometimes how? Chapter 5. Bowling for dollars. Yeah, let me scoot over. Let me scoot back. Don't do too much, bro. Okay. Yeah, I like this. Chapter 5. Bowling for dollars. Jerry Misner was an admitted obsessive compulsive, probably a necessity for a true distance man. His mind adapted well to the distance runner's daily toil. Cassidy was far more impulsive by nature and had to painfully teach himself the record-keeping, ritualistic, never-miss-a-mile mentality of a dedicated runner. Misner and Denton, like Jim Ryan or Jerry Lindgren, were natural runners who had never even attempted other sports seriously. Cassidy had good speed, and like Peter Snell, had done well in other sports before concentrating on middle distances. At times, he felt like a spiritual interloper with the other two. Occasionally, he was actually jealous of the way they casually handled the workload. Slowly, for his survival's sake, he learned the lifestyle of the compulsive personality, but when he occasionally wavered, Misner felt sorry for him and tried to help him through the bouts of blue funk and strange behavior. Cassidy would say, "The kid is largely unhappy. There, got caught in the rain and my green stamps got all plastered to my sweet and low. It'll be okay. Bet my money on the bobtail nag." The friction caused by superimposing alien psychological traits on his own personality occasionally burst forth in interesting manifestations. Cassidy arranging a quadruple moonshot, the famous four-way pressed ham, out of the tailgate of a duly licensed state vehicle. I said that like I couldn't read. Cassidy presenting a series of unauthorized awards at the cross-country banquet in mixed company. And now, a very special presentation, the Zazu Pitts Memorial Plaque to the runner who most infrequently committed flatus on the morning run. Cassidy as Nubans put it one night in bewilderment, just plain walking around talking funny. Whatever outward form his inner disquietudes took, his odd energies held Dewey Hall like a spell. In his tiny society where the extreme was commonplace, Cassidy's mystique affected everyone. He was often sought out for counsel, and his apparent reluctance to render it only added to his aura. His opinion was solicited on matters scholastic, financial, romantic, and mechanical, though he disavowed expertise in all these areas. He had the gifted athlete's innate sense of timing, a sense of providence, of fantasy, an intuition into the art of the proper moment, where the escape velocity of frivolous lunacy triumphs over the mean gravity of everyday life. By way of example, the doldrums of summer were approaching at the end of his junior year when Cassidy, bored with the hot unistilled, I didn't say that correctly, NUI-stilled Sunday lunch, posed a general question to the drowsy dining room. I wonder if Spider-Man can jump over a Volkswagen. Spider Gordon looked up sleepily from his vegetable soup. Of course he can jump over a Volkswagen, said the giant Mobley, his mouth full as usual. You ought to know that. Yes, of course he can. Spider can easily jump over a Volkswagen, Cassidy said, mumbling. Everyone turned back to the unexciting lunch, clearly disappointed. What had gotten into Cassidy? The real question. Cassidy continued after a proper pause. The real question here is whether Spider can jump over two Volkswagens. The philosophical extensions of this problem became quickly evident, and the dining room emptied like a Baroom shooting. The neighborhood was scoured for a certain make of foreign car, and the entire affair went down in Dewey Hall folklore as the day Spider Gordon busted his ass on the fourth Volkswagen. New members of the team, freshmen and transfer students, were given no special warning about Cassidy. They found out, as everyone else did, in the best way that they could. Gentlemen, Cassidy would say, rising at dinner and tapping his glass for silence. Stand-up guy. We have got to have a plan. We must have a plan even if it is wrong. There would come scattered, polite applause. Chairs scraped as everyone turned their attention to Cassidy's table. Some veterans muttered approval at these odd sentiments, while the new guys looked around in stark confusion. After waiting for the buzz to die down, Cassidy continued. I realize World Team Bowling is a relatively new concept. But gentlemen, a small chuckle here, as our attendance figures indicate, it is a concept whose time has come. Cheers from the veterans, new guys, aghast. Now, we have made some mistakes. No one denies that. Negative mumbling. Certainly no one was going to deny that. When our Italian all-star here, Jerry Miserelli, split his pants on network TV, going for that spare in the sixth in the 6th frame against Akron. Well, gentlemen, it was a bleak moment for our fledgling organization as well as for sports in general. Certainly no one is faulting Jerry for that one, but I'll tell you that all of us, players and management alike, were keeping our fingers crossed. All of us except Jerry, of course, who was doing a medium slow crab walk with a New Brunswick double ball bag jammed in his crotch. Well, it was just old, crazy Cassidy, of course, and maybe the moon was full or something, but he had eaten their bread and salt and was always walking over exhausted from his race to inquire just how was the pole vault going anyway. And to put it simply, he could get away with just about anything with them. At times, he swiveled the spotlight, and its harsh glare fell on those not quite so ready for wholesale craziness. It was in this way Misner had been discovered. As a new distance man, Misner had sat around with a dour expression through his first of Cassidy's bowling banquets and had generally been marked off as an old maid until Cassidy suddenly presented him with some mythical horror one night. Misner stood timidly as Cassidy handed him a Dr. Pepper can fashioned into it a ridiculous trophy with a scrap of tinfoil. The new runner stared with wide eyes at the bemused, expectant faces around the room. He cleared his throat. A few veterans looked at one another. This was going to be good. I would like to thank Mr. Casademius, however the hell you said that, for this here award, and I'd like to say something else while I'm standing here. You know, I wasn't really nobody at all when Mr. Casademius found me in that little 3-lane alley in Pittsburgh. Sure, I mean, I was a local hotshot and all, rolling 210, 215, and just, getting along. But I was no serious contender, is what I'm trying to tell you. Never made the cut or nothing like that. And then one day, Mr. Casademius comes in, and he watches me roll a few frames. No more than that. Just a few frames. And then he comes over, big as day, and says, son, if you get rid of that limp wrist of yours and learn to come over the ball on your follow through, you just might knock yourself over a few of them pins. I marked that as the turning point in my career, which has led me to the point at which I am at today. He started to sit down, changed his mind, and stood back up, clearing his throat. And going to the 25-pound composite ball. Thank you. Nigga, is that a fly? That's a big motherfucking fly, too. Boy, you fucking up something good. You know that. Oh, you's a bitch ass nigga. Got me looking crazy. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to read. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be a stand-up guy, really. Oh. Go ahead, land again. I dare you. Land again. Just land again, bro. Wow. Look. That nigga's flying, cuz. No, I can't stand for this. I really can't. I really can't stand for this. You know what I'm saying? I'm having a good reading. We going through the bowling banquet right now with Mr. Casademius, and I got this big ass fly coming through. I understand, bro, trying to get some information as well. You trying to hear a bit of what I got to say. Hey, you pull back up. I need something on the left hand. You know what I'm saying? Something on like a newspaper joint. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't worry, I got something for him. Let me get back right. Sorry for that bit of unprofessionalism. They sat stunned for several seconds, finally breaking into rowdy applause that quickly became a standing ovation. Misner looked around the room with a faint smile on his dark face, making little bows with his head. Cassidy, sitting across from him, all moony-eyed, fell smack in love. Chapter 6. Bruce Denton. Quentin Cassidy would have thought it amusing had someone called him a great runner. He wasn't even the best in the neighborhood, nor was Jerry Misner, who could claim all American honors at the 6-mile distance. It wasn't even close. The best runner around Kernsville was Bruce Denton, a methodical, dryly humorous, doctoral candidate in botany. While both younger runners were formidable talents in collegiate circles, Denton's place in the hierarchy of distance running was lofty and secure. The others held him in secret awe and reported his words to comrades with the solemnity of one reading from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, now, Denton says you should warm down like blah blah. Such pronouncements could halt the most vociferous, did I say that right? Vociferous? Could halt the most vociferous arguments. As an undergraduate at a small school in Ohio, Denton had been a good but not spectacular performer, running the mile in 4 minutes and 8 seconds. But as with many runners, he began to improve with age. He moved to Florida and took up graduate studies at Southeastern, where he began training again with a scientifically precise vengeance. On the altar of consistency, he offered up no less than 2 portions of his life per day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. He neatly filled calendar diary told no lies. His neatly filled calendar diary told no lies, and the symbolism of the unmissed workout became ritualistic to him, taking on an importance in his life he did not like to admit, even to himself. On a rainy day in November, he was so sick with the flu that his wife, Jenny, felt constrained to stay home from work to look after him. He threw up regularly and had diarrhea so badly his stomach muscles began cramping. Nonetheless, he arose and ran 2 eerie miles at a stumbling pace, pale and shivering the whole way. His wife was aghast. Again, in the afternoon, he repeated the process, this time nearly fainting as he staggered back into the apartment. Dr. Stavius, whose claim to fame was that he had once punctured a blister on the foot of Roger Bannister, stormed into Denton's sick room and pronounced him a madman. "What crazy?" Denton asked, trying to make his parched lips form a smile. "After today, I'm 16 miles behind for the week." Over the course of several years at Southeastern, as Denton's reputation grew, a number of undergraduate runners decided they would train with him, thinking to pick up on the secret. A new man would show up the first day expecting all manner of horrific exertion and would be stunned and giddy to find he could do so easily make it through one of Denton's calendar days. Showing up the second morning at 6:30, he would be of good cheer, perhaps trying to imagine how he would handle the pressure of his inevitable fame. That day would also go well enough, but he would begin to notice something peculiar. There was no let-up. The tempo was always moderate but steady. If a new guy decided to pick up the pace, that's where it stayed. Whether he finished with the group or not, you showed off at your peril. On the third day, assuming the new man made it that far, his outlook would begin to darken. For one thing, he was getting very, very tired. No particular day wore him out, but the accumulation of steady mileage began to take its toll. He never quite recovered fully between workouts and soon found himself walking around in a more or less constant state of fatigue depression, a phase Denton called breaking down. The new runner would find it more tedious than he could bear. The awful truth would begin to dawn on him. There was no secret. His days would have to be spent in exactly this manner, give or take a mile or two, for longer than he cared to think about. If he really wanted to see the olive wreath up close, it would simply be the most difficult, heart-trending process he would endure in the course of his life. At that point, most of them would drift away. They would search within themselves somewhere along a dusty 10-mile trail or during the bad part of a really gut-churning 440 on the track and find some key element missing. Sheepishly, they would begin to miss workouts, then stop showing up altogether. They would convince themselves there must be another way. There has to be another. The attrition rate was nearly 100%. What is attrition? Excuse me. I'm pulling out the dictionary for that one, bro. Attrition. Attrition, a wearing away by or as by friction, a normal loss of personnel as by retirement. He said the retirement rate was 100%. Damn. Retirement rate 100%. Boy was dropping them off. Only Cassidy and Misner made it through the process and finally accepted the trial of Miles. Trial of Miles. When Denton saw that they were different, he opened up to them, and they discovered for the first time that the silently gliding machine at their sides all those months actually had a personality. Accustomed as they were to the flamboyance of their teammates, they were amused by Denton's penchant for understatement. Once, when he returned from the large international road race at Springbank, Canada, they gathered around his locker, waiting for details. Well, they wanted to know, how did it go? Not too badly, I guess, said Denton, dressing in his quick, methodical way. I got in a token mile in the morning and then ran a few after the race, so the week's total won't suffer too much. Jogged around the Atlanta airport, too. He added the last thoughtfully, scratching his chin. Well, goddamn, Bruce, all the Europeans are usually there. Aussies, even some Africans. Who the hell won? Cassidy was impatient. Oh, I won it, Denton said breezily, apparently still thinking about the coup of getting a couple of extra miles at the airport. Christ, you won it? Ron Hill, Dave Bedford, Frank Shorter, all those guys usually, yeah. Denton said, pausing in the middle of tying his shoelace as if remembering something pleasant from his childhood. Nicest bunch of guys you'd ever want to meet. That boy cold. When during his first postgraduate year, Denton came from relative obscurity to run 27:10 for 6 miles at the Drake Relays. Knowledgeable distance buffs were mildly surprised that such an undistinguished performer could run an international caliber race out of the blue. However, unlikely it seemed in retrospect, at the time the phrase flash in the pan was bandied about. There are scoffers, it seems, in every field. Later, that spring when Denton made the U.S. Olympic team, nearly everyone professed surprise. Everyone except Dr. Stavius and a promising young miler named Quentin Cassidy, who watched the U.S. trials on television. True to form, Denton powered across the finish line in the 5,000 meters and simply jogged past the cameras over to his sweats and departed the stadium. Now remember, this is fiction. This is fiction. Everyone had ignored him for so long, it seemed to Cassidy as a delicious jester. Now, 2 years after that Olympiad, though they had survived the trial of Miles and knew his secret. And though they were championship collegiate runners, Cassidy and Misner knew better than anyone that Denton played the game on an entirely different level. He was unencumbered by such things as team standings, dual meets, conference titles. As a graduate student, he ran for himself, nominally for the Southeastern University track club, of which he was the sole member. His fare was paid to large meets all over the country by promoters who wanted his name for their posters. During the indoor season, he would likely be found in nearly any large city in the country on a given weekend, running either a 2-mile, which he called a deuce, or a 3-mile race. He knew or had run against most of the top runners in the world. He had raced Ron Clark on the grass in Australia, winning with a big kick. He had suffered through a high-altitude 2-mile against the smiling, fierce Kip Keino, losing to a big kick. He had spent several weeks in Eugene with the Pre, listening thoughtfully to the Bowerman-Dillinger theorems, tempering his awe with Myler, Roscoe Devine's confession that he snuck out and ran extra workouts when the assigned ones were too easy. He had listened to Gary Lindgren say bad berries about 3,000 times during a hot 20-miler outside Spokane. He had a long, pleasant argument with Kenny Moore as to the real value of the mileage ethic, as opposed to the hard/easy theory, which ended when he told the great marathoner, "You may not believe in mileage, but you sure as hell run mileage." There was little wonder Bruce Denton had more quiet confidence than Cassidy or Misner in the distance runners' little rigid hierarchy of black and white numbers. I almost said something else. And little wonder why they held him in awe. In his apartment, there was an overburdened second bedroom that served as a guest room, study, and trophy room. In the corner was an ancient filing cabinet with locking drawers. In the bottom drawer, the only one that still locked, was a flat oblong leather box. In that box was an Olympic gold medal. Chapter 7, Andrea. So we just going through and introducing a whole bunch of characters. That's what I'm getting right now. I'm just introducing a whole bunch of characters. I'm in love with you. I'm in love with her, I tell you, Cassidy. Cassidy said, let me start that all over. I don't think that was, you know what I'm saying? I'm in love with her, I tell you, Cassidy said. You don't even know her. I don't care. If I knew her, it might spoil it. Did you see her little forehead? How it was all wrinkled and sweaty? Come on. She was concentrating on her pace, for Christ's sakes. Aww. This was how it all began, back at the very start of the school year. The scrap of red yarn she carelessly tied her hair up with might have had something to do with it. Okay. Or perhaps it was the very sincere look on her face as they trundled by her on the warm-up course that day. Even Misner commented on how pretty she was. The typical fetching Southeastern University co-ed was a lovely pharmacist's daughter with a hard little body, dairy-maid complexion, and the soul of a robber baron. Cassidy had no idea what made Andrea so different, but he could sense that she had somehow survived 20 years as an attractive female in the Republic without having had her mind reamed out by Mama. the Junior League, or Helen Gurley Brown. Oh no, none of them is. Several days later, on the 3-mile warm-up, they saw her again. Try to smooth it out a little. Oh, that boy was in love from first sight without even having conversation. Wild. Try to smooth it out a little, Cassidy suggested as they passed. He demonstrated with an exaggerated version of the classical running stride, a stride that he did not use himself when the chips were down. But look, he gave her some game that he don't even use. No, that's hilarious. She looked up, her damp forehead wrinkled with concentration, and stared at Cassidy as if he were some aquatic parasite that had attached itself to her ankle while she was wading in a creek. Cassidy nearly swooned. "You're crazy," Misner told him. She appreciated the advice, Cassidy decided. She thinks you're crazy too. How do you figure? What would you do if some guy out of the blue just up and starts critiquing your stride? Challenge him to a race. If his t-shirt said Pittsburgh Holy Rollers and he started prancing around like this, you'd think he was crazy too, and you'd be right. Miss, the girl was clearly grateful. She appreciated the advice. Cassidy repeated, troubled, "The girl." Misner was annoyed. "Has a gimpy leg. I saw it yesterday and she was stretching up at the track. She probably not only didn't appreciate the advice, she probably thinks you're an asshole." Oh. Dang, he told her to work on that stride when she got a jacked up leg. Nah, that's wild. But giving up quickly was not in Quentin Cassidy's nature. A week later, he saw her at the Gay 90s, a rather unfortunately named and remarkably heterosexual tavern. Her blonde hair was down, but there was no mistaking her. Her white cotton blouse made her thin arms look very tanned, and for some reason, that sight of her made his heart hurt. Ooh. No, sir. He waited around until her two girlfriends got up to play foosball. Then he made his slew-footed entrance. She saw him coming. Well, the coach," she said. It was only faintly sarcastic. She even smiled a little, he thought. Yes, well, He spilled a trickle of beer as he started to make some expansive gesture. Idiotically, he began licking foam off his wrist. "Don't do that." "Don't do that," she said. "Right, look, I'm sorry if That's all right. I was a little annoyed, but then I figured you might have taken a class or something and maybe even knew what you were talking about." "Not really," he said happily, sliding into the booth across from her. "But I know a bunch of guys who are really good." "Are you on the track team or something?" "Yes, indeed," he said, feeling slightly loony watching her green flame eyes in a pale tavern light. "Oh my, what event do you do?" "Decathlon," he said. "Really?" she asked. "How far do you throw it?" They drifted. Dappled by the hard cypress shadows, out into the burning September sun, they drifted. In one of those pleasant, cool eddies life sometimes affords the young in fall or spring, they drifted, quite unaware of the not-so-far-off rattle of bones. "I didn't ask to go see the movie," she said. "I thought the book was sophomoric, Baroque, and sophomoric. The movie was your idea. It was my fault, but your friends were just asking." Yeah, I'm on the right page. "My friends think love story is the finest literature to come down the pike since The Prophet. You should have eased up on them. Someday they will be producing babies and not causing anyone any trouble at all." That boy trying to throw some hints, ain't he? You know what I'm saying? "All I meant was that such cornpone was a way of co-opting real life. I mean, it's fun to talk snazzy and run around and play in the snow with your girl, for Christ's sakes, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to throw a dog a frisbee without thinking I should be in slow motion or something." Tear ducts raped. I resent having my tear ducts raped, I believe is what you said. Oh. And we're following up with something about the teensy-weensy sexual members of dope-crazed screenwriters of something. Well, Mary Ellen Conosti was close to having a stroke. Yo, look, bro, I'm trying to catch a drift of where we went and where we're going right now. But remember, it said they drifted, so it took us on a drift as well. You know what I'm saying? And right now I'm just in the passenger seat drifting. She's a harmless girl, Quentin. You're gonna have to break in a little slower with some people. He looked over and gave her what he thought of as his pixie grin. Don't give me that pixie grin crap, she told him. They drifted. See? We drifting again. Cassidy was plopped without grace in his inner tube, his white bottom now thoroughly chilled by the icy waters of the Itchitucknee River. Andrea somehow accomplished a similar position without the same loss of dignity. On her it looked sultry. When she leaned back to take the sun, he looked carefully at the two brown legs draped over the edge of her tube, but could hardly detect the difference between them that would forever put a little catch in her walk. Of course, there would be something like that. He lacked interest in the perfect item. Quentin Cassidy, unmoved by kittens, sonnets, and sunsets, was nonetheless given to tragic flaws. Boy said, which leg got you limping, baby? In order to arrange this day of perfect drifting, an entirely traditional local pastime, he and Misner, now floating up ahead with his date, had arisen at 7:30 and run 17 miles. It was the only way they could spend their day in the sweet haze of Boone's Farm apple wine and still appease the great white calendar god whose slighted or empty squares would surely turn up someday to torment the guilt-ridden runner. They went through such contortions occasionally to prove to themselves that their lives didn't have to be so abnormal, but the process usually just ended up accentuating the fact. There were several ways it could be done. If they were going to the beach, they might put it off and run when they got there. But contrary to popular opinion, beach running is only jolly fun for the first 5 miles or so. After that, the cute little waves become redundant. The sand reflects the sun up into the eyes blindingly, grains of sand slipping annoyingly into the heel of the shoe or flip up on the back of the leg. 15 hot miles on a long, flat beach sounds like good sport only to those who haven't actually done it. Also, the ocean is too infinite. The run seems as if it will never end. Makes sense. They could always put training off until they got back in the evening, but that just made things worse. No beer. Ooh, excuse me. None of the sticky wine. Their friends would slyly try to tempt them, see if they really took all that training stuff seriously. It was too much to ask. Better to get it all over with and then be able to enjoy the day like any other citizen. Though he hated running long in the morning more than anything he could think of, Cassidy was ecstatic to have his whole day's training behind him. The oversized tubes floated along on the gin clear River, meandering slowly under the spooky cypress. Spooky cypress stands and pleasantly out into splotches of sun. Even though it was Florida, it was North Florida, and as winter approached, tubing would be forgotten until spring. Cassidy paddled over awkwardly to Andrea's tube and invited her to double up. Flirting with disaster for several seconds, she finally accomplished the maneuver. "Next time you do the transfer at sea, please," she said. Her warmth beside him was searing. She smelled of summer, youth, sea and ski, and moist, slightly sweet sex. Uh-oh. Hold on. Hold on. Clearly edible. Hold on. His head spun from the wine and sun. Oh. Hey, look. We ain't even gonna go there. Muscles along the top of his thighs trembled from his morning exertion. In a month or so, he knew they would carry him screaming around the track. He had the power. Ouch, she said. What's that all about? Say what you got going on, Playboy. Yeah, brother trying to get him some. I don't knock you, brother. You know what I'm saying? Get it how you live. Get how you live, Cassidy. Play it for life. Chapter 8. Dick Doobie. The head football coach pushed the sweaty baseball cap back on his bristly crew-cut head, leaned way back in his 1,495 execute Kleiner, plopped his ripple-soled coaching shoes up on his gigantic gleaming desk, and wondered what in the world was becoming of him. With mournful pride, he surveyed the wide expanse of lush maroon and silver carpeting that displayed in the very center a custom-woven and very savage-looking Daryl the Swamp Dog. The office was so large as to invite speculation as to which indoor sports might be accommodated. The Rotarians had been most unkind, whereas several years ago he would have been treated with the unbridled respect and admiration due a United States senator or even a big money media evangelist. This day's luncheon had been laced with a certain ill-concealed nastiness that now knitted Dick Doobie's brow like a $10 potholder. Cooked his ass. L.T. Doches, owner of the Fat Boys Pit Barbecue off Interstate 75, had posed the question. Since Doobie's first 3 years had allegedly been rebuilding years for the old Swamp Dogs, and keeping in mind certain early and somewhat rash predictions in retrospect, how did the coach view this past season's 4-6 record? Ooh, as LT's put it. I mean, are we going to start rebuilding again without seeing what it was we got ourselves built the last time? It was a mouthful of a question. LT having obviously practiced it some, but he delivered it without a flaw, and to the affirmative grumbles and guffaws of the group, replaced his pear-shaped bottom on the Holiday Inn folding chair. Dick Doobie, meanwhile, discerning all he wanted to know about the general Rotarian mood. A little surprised by the brewing hostility, he babbled something about some real fine junior college transfers, some red shirts who would be a real great help to us out there next year, and a few other favorite mouth-worn Doobie maxims. Kernsville cynics suspected that the NCAA held yearly seminars for the purpose of allowing football coaches to swap these fluffs of wisdom back and forth. Doobie's favorite was, in order to win, you got to avoid losing first. Things like that. Oh my God, bro. Coach, what is you saying? Oh yeah, that's facts for sure. The same material that at one time would have at least won nodding approval now netted him a few muffled coughs. He was dying up there with a live mic and a glass of watery iced tea. He tried to tell some funny anecdotes, generally racially tinged, mangled one-liners uttered by some player or another, the punchline of which inevitably began, "Well, gosh, coach." As a last resort, he told some of his "my daddy used to say" chestnuts that always won chuckles of nostalgia for the old man, if not appreciation for his fumbling offspring. Nothing worked. Damn. Finally, one sports writer, a short Jewish fella Doobie disliked intensely, asked Doobie's opinion of the dump dick Doobie. Oh my gosh, bro. Asked Doobie's opinion of the dump dick Doobie bumper stickers that were showing up on cars in and around Kernsville. Damn, in your city. In your city. Doobie cleared his throat. Well, now, there has always been dissident elements, you see, in our American system. And while these people may think they are doing the right thing, and while they are certainly entitled to their own opinion, you see, such disloyalty to the program can only... This tack also netted him little in the way of positive Rotarian feedback. It was becoming painfully obvious to him that many of these very Rotarians were either among the dissident elements or were sympathetic to them. Dick Doobie was discovering that a football coach in a small southern town walks upon water only if he is either rebuilding or else whaling tar out of Ole Miss. There is no middle ground called holding your own, and you can sell the rebuilding excuse only so long before you find your career folding up like a 10-year-old roadmap. Uprisings are fomented. Rotarians go on cautious rampages and, the infamy. The very bumpers of automobiles call for your destruction. Dick Doobie took his feet off the desk and pressed the intercom. "Mary Lou, come on in here a minute, will you? Will you, hon?" His mind reeled with daring, if half-baked, stratagems. Mary Lou, hoping for hanky-panky, bounced in, mini-skirted and primed for action. She sported an alarming beehive hairdo. "Shall I get the key to the whirlpool?" she asked coyly. Not now, hun. I need you to take something down for me." Frowning slightly, she left to get her steno pad. "This will be a memo to all coaches from Dick Doobie as athletic director, not head football coach. You don't need to write all that down, hun. I mean, word for word and all. Like when I said not head football coach, you didn't need to write not head. Well, you know what to put." Her shoulders sagged impatiently. What an incredible mind, she thought. They went through something like this nearly every time. Doobie waited self-consciously for a few moments as if to allow his words to fall from the air so he could start fresh. Ahem. New rules on hair grooming and dress. Procedures for Southeastern University athletes. This man is fumbling the football program and got the nerve to talk about hairdos and attire. Dick Doobie. Dump Dick Doobie. In afternoon. Chapter 9, in afternoon. The runners circled the big grass field in a slow, prancing jog, their shirtless bodies gleaming with sweat. As they trotted by Ben Cornwall, they all looked up at him almost simultaneously. Their rasping and coughing grew louder as they approached. 1:38, 2 to go, guys, the coach told them. They immediately lowered their heads and continued jogging. They were on a rest interval. respite in the acid storm. Cornwall walked back across the field to catch the next 660 on his split timer. A 3:30 jog wasn't much recovery time, and he could tell by the strain on their faces that they were working hard. The last two would be quicker, perhaps, but Cassidy and Misner had made sure the first 6 were evenly paced and fast. Cornwall studied his 2-star runners as he crossed the field to the opposite post. They looked less distraught than the rest, but not by much. Cassidy was saying something to Misner, who replied with a thin smile. Cornwall couldn't hear it, of course, and wouldn't have understood it if he did. If he had. The conversation between gasps went like this. "There must be some mistake," Cassidy said. "I have not yet attained that sense of euphoria commonly reported by runners. You're speaking no doubt of the fabled third wind. I'm not sure. I haven't read Runner's World lately, so I don't know what they're calling it this month." When they reached the post, Cornwall clicked the expensive timer and studied with admiration the easy power of the runners flowing into their long strides. The head track coach, oddly enough, didn't know a great deal about distance running. Cassidy and Misner were constantly, though very unobtrusively, amending his workouts, having been a javelin man in college. But Cornwall understood that the half-milers, and true distance men were the heart of a track team. They could run everything from the mile relay on up. It was imperative that he pay attention to their training. He had learned very early, though, that the milers and distance men were like seeds. The good ones, given minimum care, just grew on their own. He had only a casual jogger's appreciation for their training. He knew from his own days of conditioning that what they were doing before his eyes was far beyond his ken, and he knew the daily grind took its toll. The attrition. You know what I'm saying? We learned that word. The attrition rate was startling. So it was diminishing. Even the most promising runners, disheartened by injuries or poor performances, would sometimes leave their scholarships on his desk. Damn. He never tried to talk them out of it. He knew that once they lost it, it was gone for good. Now, as he watched across the big field, the runners entered the far turn with Cassidy and Misner still leading. Up close, their breathing would make a considerable racket, but from here, they appeared to be gliding along without effort. From the middle of the pack, a shorter runner moved up to their shoulders. Without even having to squint, Cornwall knew it would be Nubens. If they didn't break him, Cornwall thought, that Nubens might turn out to be something after all. Entering the far straight, Cassidy and Misner picked up the pace slightly, and only Nubens hung on with them. They seemed to sense his presence, but showed no outward sign of it. In an interval workout, there was no objection to a hard finish, so long as the early running had been even and taxing. Dogging in the early stages in order to shine later on was considered antisocial behavior. Cassidy saved his fiercest workout kick for such occasions, but Nubens had been conscientious and was now making a bid for status. He knew very well Cornwall was watching closely. Cassidy slackened somewhat, and Nubens went by, pulling up to Misner as they came out of the turn. But when the freshman bore down in the last straight and tried to pull away, Misner matched him stride for stride. Cornwall smiled as he clicked the split timer for them. He looked down at the watch and thought, Jesus, they had ran 1:28. Nubens looked entirely washed out, a face without hope or humor, but he kept on jogging. Cassidy caught up to Misner, and they trotted along without speaking. Cornwall still did not understand that pairing. They were so different. Cassidy was breezy, almost lighthearted for a runner. Misner was studious and serene, but they were identical in one respect. The haunted cast of their eyes as they entered a gun lap was exactly the same. The coach walked back across the field, still studying Cassidy and Misner, jogging their rest interval. Those two, he thought, I'll never get another pair like them. Just read the watch for them. See they get fed, get them their plane tickets, and keep them in shoes. No small expense. And they'll go out and win everything in sight. They were chugging up to him now, looking up from their despondent jog with the same expectant expression. It's always amused him how interested they were in the numbers, no matter how exhausted. It was the first thing they wanted to know after a race, even from the depths of their distress. Leaders, 128. Class, 129.5. Everyone else hit at about 133. Last one, fellas. The runners were jogging, especially slowly now. This was the way they always did it. Everyone would want to be as fresh as possible for the last one in order to end up on an upbeat. Actually, they would still be out of breath when they started the last one, and Cornwall thought again how surprising it was that after the first several intervals, they looked as bad as they would get. The rest seemed to take no more out of them, though he knew each one had to be more difficult than the one before. But then they blew into the last one like they couldn't think of a better way to end the day. They were a strange crowd. Runners, Cornwall thought. They were strange back in his track days, and they were still strange. They finally arrived at the starting post with their mincing little steps. With a deep gasp, leaned into the last one. As Cornwall clicked the watch, they flew into the first turn, and Cornwall smiled again. Cassidy was already 10 yards in front. By the time they were out of the turn and into the far straight, he was 25 yards ahead and still telescoping away. Misner smoothly led the rest of the pack. Around the final turn and into the straightaway, Cassidy powered on with crisp, businesslike strides. There was a lift in his stride, and from his expression, Cornwall could tell he was serious. 40 yards in front, Cassidy flashed by the post, and Cornwall flicked. But I was in that, though. I was in that. You know what I'm saying? I was in that. Like, I could see it. You know what I'm saying? I could see the stride. I could see the click of the watch. You know what I'm saying? I was right there. I was living in it. Timer caught me off guard. I ain't even gonna lie to you. You see me jump? I ain't no punk, though. It just caught me off guard, bro. Don't get it twisted, man. You know what I'm saying? I got the hands for real. But nah, man. Once a runner, John L. Parker Jr., I appreciate you for taking this time to read with me, Khaliq Hakeem. It's your brother, the librarian. Go.